This is TWiT.
All right, just a few hours ago, U.S. President Donald Trump signed a new executive order to improve the government's cybersecurity practices and protect its infrastructure from threats. Joining us to talk about the order is Eric Geller, cybersecurity reporter for Politico. How's it going, Eric?
Great. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you back. So first, give us some insight on what exactly this new executive order aims to achieve.
Well, it really kicks off a number of reviews more than setting any particular policies in motion. It essentially says, look, it's the policy of the U.S. government to have secure federal networks, to have secure critical infrastructure, hospitals, power plants, that kind of thing. And here are a bunch of reports that different cabinet officials have to carry out. It doesn't, aside from a handful of things like telling federal agencies that they have to use a specific cybersecurity framework from a technical standards agency, it doesn't actually lay out a lot of requirements. It's basically just, hey, we need to assess the situation. We need to see what's out there. And then we're going to start taking in some recommendations from the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Director of the FBI, the Director of National Intelligence, and other senior officials.
So President Trump almost signed a similar order only a few days into his presidency back in January. Why didn't that happen then? What happened then?
Yeah, well, it's very unclear. What had happened during the transition after he won, he got together former New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani and a couple of other people who were sort of tangentially interested in cybersecurity. And they basically set to work looking at what they could do in this area. Once he took office, in that kind of 11-day span between when he was inaugurated and when he was first supposed to sign the order, basically a lot of career staffers at the Office of Management and Budget, DHS, the White House, started looking at what they had done and basically said, look, you need to let us weigh in, you need to bring us into the process. And that's what slowed the process down. He was supposed to sign it on actually the last day of January, but it turned out they hadn't really briefed all the agencies. They hadn't gotten enough input. And so they basically postponed that. And, look, it's been, more than 3 months since then. We've been trying to figure out when it was going to happen. And it just kind of came as a surprise.
I know during the end of the Obama administration, there was a lot of talk about how old a lot of the systems were, and they switched over from BlackBerries to iPhones. And is there anything in this document about how they're going to deal with all of the aging cybersecurity infrastructure?
Not at all. This is, when I said earlier, it sets out a lot of reports. That's what these reports are going to get into. They're going to explore where are areas where we can have cost savings, where are areas where we can where we can move to the cloud, where we can move to shared services, where we can try to bring in some private sector wisdom and understanding. Maybe some corporations out there understand how to, run network better than this particular agency does. And so that is what you're going to see a lot of in the next few months. I should say that this White House senior advisor, Jared Kushner, is the director of the American Technology Council and also the head of a new office called the Office of American Innovation. The idea behind those two entities is Jared and Chris Liddell, who is another tech innovation guy at the White House. They're going to go out and talk to a bunch of corporate executives and basically pick their brains and say, what are some things the private sector is doing better than the government, and how can we apply that to federal networks and federal IT? I think that is the tip of the spear in terms of what Trump is doing on cybersecurity. Is he really wants to look at what the private sector knows that the government doesn't.
Now, you mentioned kind of Obama's, former President Obama's efforts in this area, but you also kind of mentioned that this is kind of broad strokes. It's not very specific. I know that in the past there have been some moves by President Trump to really kind of get in there and upend the norm, and kind of really radically change things. But we're not seeing that here, right? This isn't really taking things in a different direction from where former President Obama's cybersecurity efforts were lying at that point. Is this just adding to that?
That's correct. One of the really interesting things about reporting on cybersecurity is that it is one of the very few areas where there isn't a lot of acrimony and partisan finger pointing. There is certainly a lot of criticisms across the industry, but it isn't really political. It's more technical and that kind of thing. This is not an area where Trump came in thinking that he had to repudiate what the Obama administration had done. People were concerned that he was going to be a little bit more military heavy, but this executive order dispels those concerns, at least for now. We're actually just about to put up a story where we talk to, among other people, essentially the top three cyber folks in the Obama administration, the cyber coordinator at the White House, the chief information officer, and the chief information security officer. And all of them said, this looks pretty good. This looks like a validation of what we were doing. And I think that gets to, again, this is not an area where there's a lot of partisan tension. This is an area that is very technical, that is very detail oriented. And for the most part, you are seeing bipartisan consensus on a lot of the steps here.
Yeah, that's my big question, too, because as you say, that cybersecurity and also privacy is seen as very nonpartisan. And so do you think that makes things move more quickly?
For what is very detail-oriented and for the most
Sorry, can you say that again?
Bipartisan consensus on a lot of steps.
Did we just fire off your Husk or your Amazon Echo?
I think you did. Sorry about that. Say that one more time. I think something happened there.
I try to think of what word I said that sounded like that.
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry about it.
Like you said, it seems to me like cybersecurity and privacy are very nonpartisan. Do you think that means that things will move faster or slower because there's no one pushing really hard for their team?
Well, it's interesting. I think slower, and I also think, you raised the point that there may not be as much fierce advocacy. I think another question here is this is a very technical endeavor, and so this is a slog. This is going to be a very bureaucratic process. The Office of Management and Budget is going to get with every agency and say, where are some areas where we can find cost savings? Where are some areas where we can move to shared services? These aren't conversations that lend themselves to kind of moving very quickly. You could say that about a lot of things, as the healthcare reform effort has showed, but this is in particular an area, especially because of the security concerns, this is an area where they are going to move very slowly. I wouldn't expect to see a major policy change in the next couple of months. Now, who knows? We've certainly seen a lot of surprises from this administration, but this is, I think, one place where they're going to stay the course.
Probably pretty safe to say, but how much of an influence do you think the things that we see in this executive order were influenced by kind of the allegations of election hacking by the Russian government and the other things that we continue to hear about day after day as far as kind of technological, insecurities, let's say?
Well, look, the president certainly recognizes that this is a topic of conversation. I don't necessarily know that he would have paid attention to it to the degree he did during the campaign if it weren't being discussed in another context. Maybe he would have, I don't know. But the White House is very strongly denying that there is any connection. Tom Bossert, the Homeland Security advisor, when he was briefing reporters today, said this is not a Russia prompted executive order. This is a U.S. prompted executive order. This is about the vulnerabilities that exist in our networks and would exist even if this other conversation weren't out there. So, look, the people who have been preparing this executive order in recent months are career staffers at the National Security Council, OMB. These are not people who are looking around and saying, wow, look at the Russian hacking story. We really need to put something together to save face. These are people who have been dealing with these challenges for years, and now they have an opportunity to move forward again with it.
Awesome. Eric Geller from Politico.com. Really appreciate you taking time tonight to talk with us about this. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Where can people follow you? Is it at Eric Geller on Twitter?
Yep. And if you go to Politico.com, anytime there's a cyber story, there's probably something from me up there.
Yep. I see them all the time. Big fan of your work. Thank you again, Eric. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Now I know how to set off your Amazon Echo as well. So
Sorry
I'll try to use that only for good.
Yes.
Take care.
See you later. Have a good night.